A young waitress approached an influential millionaire and quietly warned him not to finalize a crucial agreement with his closest friend. The next morning, people in her modest neighborhood saw a sleek, expensive car parked near her small home. Kibwe Mbeki stood by a polished marble table in an elegant cafe, carefully straightening his shirt cuffs while casting quick glances around the opulent setting. This day was meant to be one of celebration. He and his longtime confidant, Iomide, were about to secure the largest business contract in their entire career. This deal promised to crown their firm as a leader in the field and secure their financial prosperity for the foreseeable future. The cafe hummed with low murmurs, clattering silverware, and the rich fragrance of premium coffee. Although everything appeared flawless, a hidden turmoil was taking shape just beneath the surface. Iomide, I'm going to the restroom, Kibwe announced, rising from the table's glossy surface. Iomide, engrossed in his phone screen, merely offered a slight nod. Kibwe strolled away, his chest swelling with a sense of triumph. Years of sweat and dedication had led him here. Together, he and Iomide had steered their enterprise to dizzying heights, and now they stood on the brink of striking a business arrangement that would catapult them even further. Yet, in Kibwe's brief absence, the atmosphere around the table shifted in a subtle but ominous way. While Kibwe was gone, the normally silent waitress, Dahlia, approached with a pitcher of chilled water. She had been employed at the cafe for only a few months, diligently focusing on her responsibilities without interfering in the personal affairs of the wealthy patrons who ate there. But on this particular day, her attention became sharply fixed on a conversation she inadvertently overheard. Iomide, convinced nobody was listening, spoke in hushed tones into his phone. His words sent a jolt of alarm through Dahlia's spine. "Everything's lined up," Iomide hissed, his tone dripping with a cold certainty. "Kibwe is clueless. As soon as the paperwork is inked, I'll gain full power. By the time he figures it out, it'll be too late. I've spent months putting this plan in motion. The entire company, all its assets, everything falls to me." Dahlia's hands quivered, nearly tipping over the water she was supposed to pour. She backed away, struggling to keep calm. Her heart pounded painfully. She could not comprehend how Iomide, supposedly Kibwe's closest ally and partner, could be weaving such an underhanded scheme. She retreated to the kitchen, trying to gather her composure. Although she had nothing personal at stake, Dahlia felt a burning need to act. How could she silently watch a person's life's work be stolen by his own longtime friend? Moments later, Kibwe returned from the restroom, entirely unaware of the fraught conversation that had taken place in his absence. Iomide greeted him with his usual easy grin, concealing all hints of malice behind a mask of friendly charm. Dahlia, peeking out from the kitchen area, felt torn by uncertainty. She was a simple waitress. She lacked influence or wealth, but she couldn't stand by and let an oblivious man sign his name away. She bided her time, watching the two men quietly. Kibwe seemed genuinely content, even proud of the grand opportunity awaiting them. Everything about him suggested trust. In stark contrast, Iomide's every gesture felt somehow contriveda facade that Dahlia now recognized as dangerous. Finally, she decided to warn Kibwe. Her face paled as she walked toward his table. She caught sight of Iomide standing up and stepping out to take a phone call. Summoning every ounce of courage, she approached Kibwe, who looked up from the contract that held his fortune in its crisp pages. "Excuse me, sir," Dahlia managed to say, her voice low. "I overheard something you need to hear." Kibwe gave a questioning glance. He had rarely conversed with this particular waitress. Her tone sounded tense and urgent. "Yes? What is it?" Dahlia steeled herself. "I think your partner, Iomide, is planning to betray you," she blurted. "He was just on the phone, saying he wants to take the company once you sign those papers." Her revelation sounded absurd even to Dahlia's own ears, and Kibwe's immediate reaction matched that disbelief. "What? That's impossible, he said, voice uneven. We've been best friends for ages. We built this company side by side. Dahlia shook her head, her eyes reflecting genuine worry. I'm telling you the truth. He was quite explicit on the phone about how you wouldn't see it coming. I wouldn't bother you if I wasn't completely sure. Kibwe's gaze flickered between the contract resting on the table and the door through which Ayomide had left to take his call. Could there be some misunderstanding? He asked, though a crack in his voice betrayed his growing unease. Dahlia firmly shook her head once more. I heard him say you'd be left with nothing after the deal closes. Uncertainty flashed across Kibwe's face, followed by a pang of confusion. He scrutinized Dahlia. She seemed earnest, her hands still shaking slightly. He could sense she had no reason to fabricate such a story, especially not to a stranger like himself. Thank you for telling me, Kibwe murmured, cutting through the thick tension. I'll be careful. Relief flickered in Dahlia's eyes. I'm sorry if this is too forward, she said, stepping back. I just couldn't stay silent. Kibwe nodded, his heart racing faster. No, I appreciate it. When Ayomide rejoined the table, Kibwe carefully masked his concern behind a calm exterior. He left the contract untouched, telling Ayomide he needed a bit longer to finalize. He mentioned wanting to double-check some details. Ayomide's smile never wavered, but there was a fleeting, almost unreadable spark of annoyance in his gaze. All right, just don't take too long, Kibwe. Time is money. Kibwe managed a thin smile. I know. I promise I'll act soon. Inside, he wrestled with a whirlwind of emotions. Could Dahlia really be right about Ayomide's plan? The notion collided with years of trust and shared endeavors. Despite that, a shadow of doubt had taken root in Kibwe's mind. He needed more facts before accusing his closest partner. By the time they exited the cafe, Kibwe had already resolved to seek help from someone who specialized in uncovering hidden plots. Longtime private investigator Tunde. That same night, Kibwe dialed Tunde's number, describing the uneasy suspicion that weighed on him. Tunde had assisted Kibwe in the past on smaller matters, always delivering thorough, reliable insights. Hearing the seriousness in Kibwe's voice, Tunde asked sharp questions about the entire scenario. So, you want me to investigate Ayomide? You believe he might be pulling a con on you? Kibwe let out a tense breath. I'm not sure I believe it, but I have to find out. Someone overheard him bragging about taking over everything behind my back. It might be nothinger. It might be the biggest betrayal of my life. Tunde paused briefly. I'll look into his finances, business contacts, and personal records. Give me a few days to see if something suspicious is going on. After hanging up, Kibwe felt both relief and lingering anxiety. He had rarely questioned Ayomide's intentions, but the idea of possible treachery rattled him. Rather than toss and turn in doubt, he channeled his energy into verifying the truth. Meanwhile, the contract remained unsigned. Ayomide acted perfectly understanding, but Kibwe noted the flashes of impatience creeping into his partner's tone. More than once, Kibwe spotted Ayomide sneaking phone calls or texting with a sense of urgency that raised new concerns. 2 days later, Kibwe's phone buzzed. It was Tunde. Heart-pounding, Kibwe answered. Did you find something? He asked immediately. Tunde sighed. I uncovered unsettling details in Ayomide's bank history. He's got an offshore account under his name, and he's been moving funds there in small increments, just enough to go unnoticed under normal audits. So far, it's not an enormous amount, but it's still a big red flag. Looks like he started about the time you both began discussing this major contract. Kibwe leaned forward in his chair, swallowing the dull ache that formed in his chest. So he's funneling money out of our company behind my back? Possibly. I'm comparing the deposits against your company's financial records to see exactly where the money originates. But it seems deliberate, Tunde explained. If your new deal goes through, he might gain sole control of essential assets. We've got to confirm more. Kibwe rubbed his forehead in frustration. I need solid proof. Without it, I can't confront him. Not yet. Tund agreed. Give me another day or two. I'll dig deeper and update you. When the call ended, Kibwe felt a surge of anger mixed with sorrow. The seeds of Dahlia's warning had grown into full-blown suspicion. Could his closest friend truly be orchestrating his downfall? Despite the internal storm, Kibwe still met Ayomide during work hours, keeping their routine intact to avoid raising suspicion. Every handshake and every friendly "how's it going" felt strangely hollow now. Ayomide stayed outwardly kind, discussing future plans for the company expansion, hinting at the new deal's potential to skyrocket their profit margins. But to Kibwe, every word felt tainted, reminding him of the possibility that Ayomide was all too ready to stab him in the back. One evening, the two had dinner at their usual spot. Ayomide, swirling his glass of sparkling water, asked smoothly, "Any chance you've decided on signing those papers soon, Kibwe?" Kibwe carefully masked his swirling thoughts. "I'm going over the fine print again. I want to be sure everything's aligned for both of us." Ayomide's friendly grin stayed in place, though Kibwe sensed a faint flicker in his partner's eyes. "Of course, we've been working on this for ages. Now that success is right in front of us, it'd be a shame to let caution hold us back." Kibwe played along. "Sure, but let me verify a couple of last details first." Late that night, long after dinner, Kibwe found himself driving to a quiet, modest area of the city. He had requested Dahlia's address from one of the cafe employees, explaining that he wanted to deliver something to her in person. He parked in front of a small, tidy home. With hesitant steps, he knocked on the door. A surprised Dahlia opened it, wearing casual clothes quite different from her cafe uniform. "Mr. Mbeki?" she asked, blinking in surprise. "Is something wrong?" "No," Kibwe assured her. "I wanted to speak to you privately, away from the cafe. May I come in?" She gestured him inside. The living room had simple furniture and well-worn rugs, reflecting humble circumstances. Dahlia appeared wary but polite, offering him a seat. Kibwe got right to it. "I just want you to know that I took your warning seriously. I asked an investigator to look into Ayomide's finances, and he found questionable activity. I'm afraid your suspicion was right." Dahlia's eyes widened. "He's really stealing from you?" Kibwe nodded, an ache tightening his throat. "It looks that way. I haven't confronted him yet, but it appears he's been preparing to seize my share of our business once we finalize this deal. Thank you for telling me what you overheard. I might have lost everything." Relief and sadness mingled on Dahlia's face. "I'm so glad you believed me." Kibwe studied her cramped living space, noticing medical equipment in a corner. "I heard you had to leave school to care for your mother," he said quietly. "If you're still interested in finishing your studies, I'd like to help you do that. You saved me, want to pay that forward." Tears glistened in Dahlia's eyes. "Are you sure? I never expected anything. I was just trying to protect you from that betrayal." Kibwe nodded firmly. "I'm certain. Let me help you, the way you helped me." Days passed as Tunde dug deeper into Ayomide's background. Kibwe felt as though he was living two separate lives. By day, he acted as Ayomide's business partner, smiling in meetings and discussing profits. By night, he waited anxiously for Tunde's phone calls that updated him on the looming conspiracy. Finally, Tunde reached out with a sobering announcement. "I've found out exactly how much he siphoned off. It's at least 5 million. He's been moving it in steady, careful steps so no one would notice. He's also been speaking to some of your major rivals. It sounds like he wants to orchestrate a takeover and step in as the sole boss once you sign." Kibwe's voice trembled with anger. 5 million. I can't believe how long this has been going on right under my nose. If you sign the contract now, you'd unknowingly transfer a lot of power to him, and he'd freeze you out. We have enough documentation to freeze certain assets, but you have to act fast. Otherwise, he might vanish with the money and sabotage your company. A wave of sorrow and disgust swept over Kibwe. He'd never imagined Ayomide, the friend he'd known since childhood, could be so devious. Let's freeze what we can right away, Kibwe muttered. I'll confront him once our attorneys have locked down the accounts. Understood, Tunda replied. We'll work with your legal team to handle this quickly. Within 24 hours, Kibwe's lawyers moved to protect the company's assets. They quietly sealed any accounts linked to Iomide's suspicious transactions, ensuring he couldn't pull out more money or redirect additional funds. Once that was settled, Kibwe called Iomide to meet at a private office space they sometimes rented for confidential negotiations. Iomide arrived promptly, wearing an unmistakable air of self-assurance. He greeted Kibwe with his usual smile. So, is this finally the day we sign those documents? Kibwe didn't bother returning the smile. Sit down, Iomide. We need to talk. The tension in the room was immediate. Iomide dropped into a chair, crossing his arms. Everything all right, partner? I know what you've been doing, Kibwe stated, voice tense. Every covert fund transfer, every plan you made to shut me out once I signed the new deal. I've already frozen your accounts. You can't hide it anymore. Iomide stiffened, though he tried to maintain a mask of confusion. What on earth are you talking about, Kibwe? I have every bank record. My investigator uncovered it all. You've been siphoning money for months. Why? Why betray me like this? For a beat, Iomide was silent, shock visible on his face. But his features hardened quickly, transforming into something cold. Because I'm tired of watching you get all the glory. We built this together, but people always talk about you. Kibwe Mbeki, the genius businessman. Meanwhile, I'm invisible. Kibwe's voice quivered with anger. You think that justifies taking millions behind my back? Plotting to take the company I helped create? I've always treated you as an equal. Iomide stood, his fury overshadowing any guilt. Don't pretend you're a saint. You've always been the golden child in our partnership. I deserve more, and I was finally going to get it. You're delusional, Kibwe shot back. Now you've lost everything. I've secured the accounts and my lawyers are ready to sue you for fraud. Iomide let out a bitter, humorless laugh. You think you can stop me that easily? I've got people on my side you don't even know. I'll find a way to make you regret this. But Kibwe refused to flinch. Good luck, he said icily. We're finished here. Get out. Iomide, his face contorted with rage, stormed out of the office, leaving Kibwe behind to grapple with the shattering of a friendship he once treasured. Dahlia had waited outside the office, sensing something huge was happening. When she saw Iomide stomp off, eyes blazing, she guessed the confrontation had occurred. She quietly stepped into the room, finding Kibwe leaning heavily against the table, shoulders tense with anger and heartbreak. Is it over? She asked gently. Kibwe nodded. Yes, he admitted it. Or at least, he tried to justify his actions. We're done. I'm really sorry, Dahlia said softly. She could see the pain behind Kibwe's eyes. He took a moment to steady his breathing. It hurts, losing someone I thought I knew inside and out. But I had to stop him from destroying everything. Dahlia rested her hand on his arm in a gesture of comfort. If you need anything, I'm here to help. A flicker of gratitude passed through Kibwe's gaze. Thank you, Dahlia. I appreciate everything you've done. Together, they left the quiet office, stepping onto the street where life moved on, oblivious to the silent war that had just taken place. Although Kibwe felt stunned by Iomide's betrayal, he also felt relief that the worst had been revealed before signing those risky papers. He still had a business, and he still had Dahlia's friendship. Once the immediate shock settled, Kibwe focused on cleaning up the damage Iomide had left behind. His legal team began building a solid case for fraud, breach of trust, and other violations. They also prepared for the possibility that Iomide might retaliate through the media or by contacting clients. Meanwhile, Dahlia officially started her new position at Kibwe's firm. Though she was initially nervous, having never worked in a corporate environment, their quick mind and strong work ethic made her stand out. She teamed up with a mentor named Sophia, who guided her through the complexities of financial reports, budget projections, and daily office tasks. Despite her humble beginnings, Dahlia took to corporate life better than anyone expected. Within a few weeks, people praised her diligence, and Kibwe recognized her knack for innovative ideas. She often spotted issues others overlooked, then proposed clever solutions. Between the legal meetings and the business expansions, Kibwe stayed busy. But he still found time to chat with Dahlia, checking on her progress and offering advice. The crisis with Iomide, though painful, had opened Kibwe's eyes to new partnerships, new foundations of trust. Then, a twist emerged. One morning, Kibwe's security guard approached him carrying a sealed envelope. "This arrived for you, sir," the guard said, frowning. "No return address." Inside the envelope, Kibwe found a small USB drive. Alarm prickled the back of his neck. He slipped it into his computer. A lone video file appeared on screen, and he clicked it. Grainy footage revealed Iomide sitting in a modest hotel room, scowling at the camera with a smug tilt of his head. "Kibwe," Iomide began, his voice cutting with resentment. "You must be feeling proud of yourself. You froze my bank accounts, wrecked my plans, and tossed me aside. But guess what? I'm still here. And I'm not finished." Kibwe clenched his fists, dread sinking in. Iomide went on, "I've gathered information enough to ruin your spotless image. When journalists get my evidence, your precious business empire will come crashing down. You won't see it coming." The video ended abruptly, leaving Kibwe staring at a dark screen. A chill wrapped around him. He hurriedly called Tunde. "Tunde, it's Iomide. He sent me a threat, claiming he's about to release something damaging." Tunde's voice stayed calm. "Send me the video. We'll track any digital trail. He's probably bluffing, but we can't assume. Let's see if we can discover his location." Over the next several days, Kibwe felt the anxious weight of Iomide's threat. Every morning, he checked local and national news, bracing for a scandal that might never appear. Tunde's investigators traced the video back to a nearby hotel, but Iomide had checked out before they arrived. It was clear he was staying a step ahead, constantly on the move. Meanwhile, Dahlia noticed how tense Kibwe seemed. One evening, after noticing him alone in his office well past normal working hours, she asked gently, "Is everything okay?" "It's Iomide," Kibwe confessed. "He's threatening to leak false accusations or some damaging story to the press." Dahlia's brow furrowed. "He won't give up, will he?" "I won't lie, I'm worried," Kibwe said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Bad rumors, even if false, can destroy a business. I'm waiting on Tunde to see if Iomide actually has anything, or if he's just bluffing." Dahlia nodded, her expression firm. "Whatever happens, I'll help. You're not alone in this." Her words offered a measure of comfort. For the first time, Kibwe realized how invaluable her support had become. No matter the trouble Iomide stirred up, Kibwe took heart in knowing he had allies. Tunde finally called with progress. "We've intercepted some communications. Iomide tried selling a story about you being involved in illegal finances, apparently to discredit you. Thankfully, he has no genuine proof. He's mixing small truths and big lies, hoping the press will run it without checking." "That's a relief," Kibwe breathed. "So it's basically a smear campaign?" "Yes, exactly. He's accusing you of shifting money offshore, claiming you cooked the books. If he succeeds in convincing the right reporter, it could spark a frenzy of suspicion," Tunde explained. Kibwe's grip on his phone tightened. "So how do we stop him?" "We've already contacted every media outlet he approached. We're showing them our evidence that he's the one who committed fraud and theft. We also have enough to start legal proceedings for defamation against him. It'll leave him nowhere to hide once this becomes public." Tunde's calm confidence settled Kibwe's nerves. "Let's move fast. I don't want him to damage my company's reputation. File the paperwork. I'll handle any interviews or press statements." "We're on it," Tunde affirmed. The following morning, a formal statement from Kibwe's law firm went out to various news channels, carefully detailing Iomide's misconduct, the transfer of millions, the covert offshore accounts, and the attempt to sabotage Kibwe's reputation through false stories. Reporters swiftly picked up on the narrative, and by midday, major outlets were pointing out Ayomide's name in connection with theft and underhanded schemes. Sitting in his office, Kibwe watched the news coverage on a flat-screen television. It was bizarre to see an event so personal splashed across public headlines, but relief followed. The story was no longer about unproven accusations against him, it now focused on Ayomide's fraud. At that moment, Dahlia poked her head in. "I just saw the news. Is it all out in the open now?" "Yes," Kibwe replied, turning down the volume. "His lies have been exposed, and the public is finally seeing what he did. He might try something else, but at this point, I think he's out of moves." Dahlia allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. "I'm glad the truth came out." Kibwe nodded, exhaling the tension built up over the past few days. "It's a weight off my shoulders. I hate having it in the spotlight, but better that than letting him ruin me quietly. You've been an incredible support through all this. Thank you." She stepped closer, concern shifting to relief in her eyes. "You never deserved what he tried to do. Now maybe you can move on." Quietly, Kibwe thought about how the one person who saved him had been Dahlia, a woman he would likely never have crossed paths with had she not overheard that crucial conversation. In the days after Ayomide's scandal broke, the tension in the company began to ease. No further threats or claims emerged, and news outlets turned their attention to other, more pressing stories. Lawyers continued their work on the criminal and civil cases against Ayomide, but for Kibwe, the crisis felt over at last. He channeled his energies back into leading the firm. To his satisfaction, Dahlia was thriving in her new position. She was working directly under a senior project coordinator, displaying keen insight into budgeting, strategic planning, and risk analysis. More and more team leaders consulted her for fresh perspectives. One evening, Kibwe noticed that Dahlia was still in the office after hours. He found her leafing through spreadsheets, eyes laser-focused on the data. A slight smile touched his lips. "You're here late," he remarked, stepping into the warm glow of a desk lamp. She glanced up, returning the smile. "I wanted to double-check these numbers. If they match my projections, we might have a faster path to expanding into a new region." Kibwe chuckled softly. "That hunger for detail is going to take you far, Dahlia." Blushing, she responded, "I'm just trying to make sure nothing slips through the cracks. After what we saw with Ayomide, I realize how important transparency is." Pride lit Kibwe's expression. "You're right, and your dedication is exactly why I want to promote you further. I need someone I can trust in a leadership position." Dahlia's breath caught. "Leadership?" "Indeed. Let's talk soon about you heading our next expansion initiative," Kibwe said, noticing the mix of excitement and apprehension in her eyes. "For now, though, don't work yourself too hard." He offered a reassuring nod before leaving her to finalize her spreadsheets. A week later, Kibwe officially invited Dahlia to his office for a private discussion. She entered with a composed but expectant expression, clearly curious about what fresh development awaited her. Once she sat down, Kibwe leaned forward, arms folded on his desk. "Dahlia, I've seen what you can do. Your contributions have gone well beyond an entry-level analyst. You show foresight, honesty, and real leadership qualities. I want you to run our next major project, focusing on expanding operations overseas." Dahlia took a moment to process this. "You want me to manage an entire expansion?" Kibwe nodded, confidence shining on his face. "Yes, you'll have a small team, a mentor to guide you, and my support. But make no mistake, you'll be the one in charge. You've earned it." Stunned, Dahlia tried to maintain composure. "I don't know what to say. Thank you for trusting me. I'll do my absolute best." He offered a warm smile. "I trust you precisely because you've proven yourself. And after everything with Ayomide, I need someone who values honesty as much as success." Dahlia flushed with gratitude. "Thank you. I won't let you down." "I know," Kibwe replied, relaxing back in his chair. She left his office on unsteady legs, her heart thrumming with excitement. It seemed unreal that she had ascended so far from the cafe days to a leadership position. But if Kibwe believed she could handle it, she intended to make him proud. With Dahlia at the helm, the new expansion project moved ahead swiftly. She handled market analyses, gathered data, and mapped out strategies with confidence. Departments that once doubted her abilities quickly realized that her unique perspective breathed new life into their old methods. Kibwe observed proudly, ready to give guidance but never interfering unnecessarily. He liked seeing her growth and the quick rapport she built with colleagues. She was no longer the shy waitress. Unsure of her place now, she was a budding leader, shaping the company's future. One evening, after a promising day of negotiations, Kibwe stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the illuminated cityscape. Shadows of tall buildings stretched across the horizon. Dahlia, finishing up a late meeting, joined him for a moment of shared reflection. "You did an amazing job leading the talks today," Kibwe said without turning around. "Our potential partners respect a clear vision and you gave them one." Dahlia allowed herself a small smile. "I appreciate the chance you've given me. I'm learning so much each day." His eyes shifted toward her, warm with sincerity. "It's not just about me giving you a chance. You've more than earned every part of it." She nodded, still struck sometimes by how drastically her life had changed. "You're too kind." With the city lights twinkling, they paused, both recalling the storm that had led to this point. Despite all the turmoil with Ayomide, or perhaps because of it, their business relationship had become one of genuine trust and mutual admiration. But the shadows of the past had not entirely vanished. Just as Dahlia and Kibwe were closing in on sealing the final pieces of the expansion, another envelope arrived at the company's reception desk. This time, the note inside simply read, "I'm not done yet." There was no signature, but Kibwe didn't need one. He showed the message to Tunde and the legal team. They concluded it was likely another empty threat from Ayomide, who might still be drifting from place to place, trying to lash out. Nevertheless, Kibwe stiffened security measures and alerted employees to watch for suspicious emails or calls. Dahlia caught wind of the message and felt a rush of concern. "Do you think he'll try again?" she asked. Kibwe shrugged grimly. "He might, but we'll be ready. We have the lawsuit, the evidence, and we've already shown the public the truth of who he is. There's little more he can do." Dahlia placed a hand on his arm, a reassuring gesture. "Then you have nothing to fear. I'm sure we'll get through this just like before." He gave a quiet laugh. "You're right. We'll handle whatever he tries." Though the note stirred old anxieties, the moment soon passed without any real follow-up. As days turned into weeks, it became clear that Ayomide either lacked the resources to stage another attack or had lost the will to fight. The firm pressed forward, untroubled by the ghost in the background. Shortly thereafter, Kibwe scheduled a celebratory gathering for everyone in the company. The expansion project, spearheaded by Dahlia, was rolling along smoothly, and morale was high after the final resolution of the scandal. Employees felt pride in working at a firm that had come through a betrayal stronger than ever. The event took place in a grand ballroom, with tall windows and warm lighting. Cheerful conversations intermingled with music as co-workers toasted to the firm's bright future. At the designated time, Kibwe stood at the front with a microphone, surveying the crowd. "Good evening," he began, the room settling into silence. "We've been through a lot. When I think about where we were a few months ago, the edge of an enormous opportunity but also facing hidden threats, I'm reminded how strong we are when we stick together. Every single one of you played a part in defending our vision." He paused, scanning their faces. "But tonight, I want to honor someone in particular. This person arrived in my life unexpectedly, yet turned out to be a vital lifeline. Let's welcome Dahlia Mzuri, who not only warned me of danger, but also stepped up to prove herself one of our finest leaders." Thunderous applause erupted. Dahlia, standing near a row of chairs, felt her cheeks grow warm. She hadn't expected such praise. Kibwe gestured her up. Dahlia is the reason I'm still standing here in front of you. She showed courage by telling me the truth I needed to hear, no matter the risks. And in the months since, she has led our international expansion initiative to incredible success. I'm proud to officially recognize her as one of our senior project directors. Dahlia climbed the few steps to stand beside him, overwhelmed but smiling brightly. The applause doubled. She took the mic with a slight tremor in her hand, her heart pounding with emotion. "Thank you, everyone," she said quietly, her voice resonating through the speakers. "I never imagined I'd be here. I'm grateful for Mr. Mbecky's faith in me and for the teamwork I see every day." Her short speech made the room cheer even more. As she handed the microphone back to Kibwe, their eyes met with shared gratitude. In that instant, the entire journey, her warning in the cafe, the heartbreak of discovering Ayomade's betrayal, and the tense weeks that followed to converge into one uplifting moment. After the applause died down, the celebrations continued. Glasses clinked, people hugged, and laughter filled the ballroom. Dahlia mingled with various department heads who offered congratulations, telling her how her sharp observations had already made their jobs easier. Eventually, Kibwe found her by the buffet table, sampling a sweet pastry. He chuckled. "I see the pastries got your attention." She grinned, a playful spark in her eyes. "I was curious." "They're pretty good, though not as nice as the ones in the cafe where I worked." Kibwe nodded with a faint smile. "That cafe, sometimes I think back to the day you first warned me, and I still wonder what would have happened if you'd chosen to say nothing." Dahlia set the pastry down, her expression turning earnest. "But I couldn't keep quiet. You were about to sign your life's work away." He reached out gently, squeezing her shoulder. "What you did changed everything for me. Now you've changed the entire company too. I hope you know how much you mean to us." Tears glazed her eyes, but she kept them in check. "Thank you, Kibwe. Your belief in me let me step into a role I never dreamed possible." He raised his glass in a light toast. "Then here's to many more achievements together." In the weeks following the celebration, life at the firm settled into a pleasant routine. Dahlia took on a larger workload, but she thrived under the responsibility. She handled phone calls with international partners, headed strategy meetings, and continued developing the expansion plan with unstoppable passion. Kibwe and Dahlia often conferred, reviewing progress and addressing new challenges as they arose. Each time they parted ways, Kibwe found himself reflecting on how a single brave act, a whisper of warning from a waitress had so drastically changed both of their lives. Within a month, the expansion was on track to surpass initial goals. Company profits began climbing, and employees felt more united than ever. The betrayal that once overshadowed them had been pushed out by fresh possibilities and bold ambitions. When the first official international branch launched, Kibwe stood side by side with Dahlia as photographers snapped pictures for business magazines. It was a moment of pride for the entire team, but especially so for Kibwe, who recognized how much of this victory owed its existence to Dahlia's honesty. Late that evening, after the ceremonies concluded, Dahlia lingered in her office, gazing at the framed newspaper articles highlighting the company's meteoric rise. She couldn't help a small smile as she recalled her humble beginnings. It had been a hard road with plenty of doubts. But now, she was forging her own path, armed with purpose, ambition, and, most of all, the backing of someone who believed in her capabilities from day one. Although the days of Ayomade's treachery were past, legal proceedings remained ongoing. Kibwe's attorneys kept him updated, saying Ayomade faced mounting evidence he could no longer deny. Frozen bank accounts, documents tying him to shady transactions, and the recorded attempts to smear Kibwe's name all pointed to inevitable legal consequences. While Kibwe was relieved that justice would be done, he no longer lost sleep over Ayomade's next move. The sense of dread that once haunted him was replaced by calm confidence. He had survived the worst betrayal imaginable and emerged stronger. One afternoon, Tunde stopped by to finalize some paperwork. I think we're just about finished. The next step involves the courts, but Ayomide's lawyers seem to know they don't have a winning case. Kibwe thanked him for everything. I can't even calculate how much you helped. Thank you for your thoroughness. Tunde acknowledged the praise. I'm always here if you need me. Glad to see your business thriving again. Once Tunde left, Kibwe wandered through the corridors of the corporate offices, passing groups of motivated staff who smiled or waved. The morale had soared since the truth about Ayomide came out. Everyone understood that unscrupulous ambitions had no place here. Kibwe's leadership and Dahlia's example had forged a new spirit of teamwork. Meanwhile, Dahlia balanced her workload, her ongoing studies, and caring for her mother. The company had arranged flexible hours for her classes, so she could continue building her academic credentials while contributing effectively at work. Though it required discipline and long nights, Dahlia never complained. For her, the reward wasn't just the salary or job title, it was the satisfaction of making a real difference in the firm's growth. She loved every minute of it. Her mother often told her how proud she was, and Dahlia's eyes sparkled whenever she discussed how far she had come since those cafe days. Sometimes Dahlia would think back to that pivotal moment when she overheard Ayomide's scheme. Stepping forward had not been easy. She could have been fired for eavesdropping on private matters or dismissed as a meddler. Instead, her moral compass prevailed, and by speaking up, she carved out a new destiny for herself and spared Kibwe from a devastating loss. Now, as she handled spreadsheets or sat in conference calls, she felt confident she was exactly where she was meant to be. Several weeks later, Kibwe hosted a small gathering in the company lounge to mark the conclusion of the first phase of the international expansion. Dahlia arrived a bit late, having been stuck on a call with foreign clients. When she walked in, she saw her colleague celebrating. A grin lit her face at the lively scene. Spotting her, Kibwe waved her over. We were waiting to make a quick toast before you got here, he said, handing her a glass of sparkling juice. This is your success too. Dahlia blushed under the friendly attention. As everyone gathered, Kibwe cleared his throat for silence. I want to thank you all for your dedication and resilience. We've managed to turn challenges into stepping stones. Our expansion is no longer a dream, it's a reality. And I want to give special acknowledgement to Dahlia, who's been at the center of this effort. He raised his glass. Everyone joined in, some clapping, some whistling. Dahlia felt her cheeks grow warm again, but her smile was genuine. After the applause subsided, the mood stayed festive, with people chatting about upcoming goals and personal weekend plans. Kibwe set his empty glass aside, approaching Dahlia with a fond look. You did an outstanding job, he said, voice low so only she could hear. It's been a whirlwind, Dahlia replied softly, but worth every moment. He nodded. Remember, you have a bright future here. Eventually, the small lounge party wrapped up. Staff returned to their tasks or headed home. Dahlia lingered behind to tidy up a few cups and napkins, not wanting to leave a mess. Kibwe, likewise, remained to ensure everything was in order. As they turned off the lounge lights, Kibwe said, Feels surreal, doesn't it? A few months ago, we were chasing after a contract that nearly cost me the entire company. Now we stand stronger than ever, with bigger plans than I imagined. Dahlia murmured, It is surreal, but the reason we thrived is your leadership. You kept going even when everything felt uncertain. He shook his head slightly. My leadership only goes so far. You were my eyes and ears, Dahlia. If not for that warning, I would have been signing a deal that let Ayomide steal everything. You changed my fate. They shared a moment of quiet understanding. Then, with a renewed sense of gratitude, both headed out, the hallway lights dimming behind them. Each step echoed a reminder of what true loyalty and courage could achieve. Not long after, Dahlia completed her next set of courses, earning top marks in her classes. Buoyed by Kibwe's mentorship and the practical business experience she was gaining, she excelled academically. Her professors often commented on her ability to connect real-world insights to classroom theory. The company's accomplishments continued to build, and eventually, the success story caught the attention of a few business magazines. Journalists began requesting interviews with Kibwe, focusing on the brand's resilience after an internal betrayal. Kibwe made sure to highlight Dahlia's involvement, praising the new generation of leadership. Before an interview one afternoon, he stopped by Dahlia's desk. "A reporter might ask you a few questions about how you rose so quickly here," he said. "Are you comfortable speaking on record?" A flutter of nerves arose in Dahlia. "I suppose. It's still strange to be in the spotlight." He reassured her, "Just be yourself. Talk about your role. People love a story about raw talent and courage." Dahlia exhaled. "All right, I'll do it. Thank you for the chance." Watching her step into the conference room to greet the waiting journalist, Kibwe felt a swell of pride. Dahlia was no ordinary success story. She was living proof that one noble act could transform everything. Weeks later, when the interview appeared in print, it told the dramatic tale of how a waitress risked her job to protect an unsuspecting entrepreneur from a cunning betrayal. Dahlia's colleagues in the office stopped by her workspace, showing her the printed article, teasing her about becoming famous. She laughed it off, but deep inside she felt deeply thankful for how far she'd come. Kibwe's part of the interview underscored trust, loyalty, and the critical choice Dahlia made. Many in the business community commented on the piece, praising the moral of the story: treat honest whistleblowers with respect and trust, or risk losing an opportunity to save your company. After reading the article, Dahlia placed it in a simple folder on her desk. She wanted it to remind her that in business and life sometimes one moment of bravery can alter the entire path ahead. The story of Ayomide's downfall and Dahlia's rise effectively wrapped up with the final court rulings. Judges found Ayomide guilty of several counts relating to fraud and financial theft. His attempt to smear Kibwe publicly never gained traction once the genuine evidence emerged. Most tellingly, the public turned against Ayomide the moment they realized he had tried to destroy someone who trusted him. Dahlia was in Kibwe's office when news of Ayomide's sentencing hit. She caught the grim look on his face, though he seemed more weary than triumphant. "I guess this closes the chapter," he remarked. "It's still sad that it came to this, but he left me no choice." Dahlia offered a consoling nod. "He did this to himself. Your conscience is clear." Kibwe gave a heavy sigh. "Still, it's not easy seeing a once close friend end up like this, but I have to move forward." They shared a meaningful glance. Neither needed to say it, but they both knew Ayomide's betrayal had changed them forever, sharpening their awareness of how fragile trust can be. In the months following the final verdict, the firm experienced unprecedented growth, boosted by steady expansions and new partnerships. Investors appreciated Kibwe's strong ethical stance and how he had handled the ordeal. Dahlia kept thriving in her leadership role, offering new ideas that pushed the company's influence farther. By this point, Kibwe had also formed a formidable leadership team with Dahlia as one of the central figures. The board recognized the improvements she brought, and Kibwe often mentioned her sense of responsibility when encouraging younger staff. There were, of course, minor bumps along the way: delays in shipments, technical glitches, negotiations that stalled, but compared to the terrifying possibility of total ruin, these problems felt manageable. With each challenge, Dahlia grew more confident, and Kibwe's faith in her grew too. Time passed quickly, filled with long workdays, large accomplishments, and personal breakthroughs. Eventually, the memory of Ayomide's betrayal no longer stung as sharply. For Kibwe, it became a lesson on the importance of surrounding oneself with honest people. For Dahlia, it was a testament to how a single moment of moral courage could spark remarkable changes. One crisp afternoon, Kibwe hosted a new hire orientation in the main conference room. After he finished introducing the company's values: integrity, growth, innovation, he asked Dahlia to speak, telling the group how she'd started. Standing at the front, Dahlia spoke openly about serving tables and then stumbling onto a conversation that nearly destroyed the boss she hadn't even known well. She summarized how she told him the truth, how that led to exposure of a scheme, and ultimately, how she landed in the role she had today. The new hires stared, transfixed. When she ended by saying, "Never underestimate your power to do the right thing," they applauded enthusiastically. Kibwe, watching from the sidelines, felt satisfaction. This story would inspire employees to nurture the honesty and courage that Dahlia so clearly embodied. Later that day, Kibwe called Dahlia into his private office. She took a seat, curious about the serious look on his face. "You know," he started, "I realize we never properly acknowledged your heroism outside of the company celebrations. You were just doing your job at the cafe, yet you took a tremendous risk for me. That's not something many people would have done." Dahlia's cheeks warmed. "It was the right thing to do," she insisted gently. He nodded. "That doesn't make it any less rare. Anyway, I've asked the board to draft a new leadership position tailored to your growing responsibilities. Effective immediately, you'll be a vice director of operations. Congratulations." Her jaw dropped. "Vice director? But you're already taking on that level of responsibility," he said, cutting her off with a smile. "All we're doing is giving you the official title and pay grade you deserve. You've proven yourself again and again." Tears gathered at the corners of Dahlia's eyes. She laughed in disbelief. "Thank you. This is beyond anything I could have dreamed." Kibwe rose, walked around the desk, and extended a handshake. She accepted, and her voice quivered with profound gratitude. "I promise I won't let you down." "I know," he replied earnestly. With her new title, Dahlia dove into the biggest projects yet. She met with international heads, balanced budgets for several expansions, and even looked into launching new product lines. Meanwhile, Kibwe was free to focus on high-level partnerships, trusting Dahlia to tackle day-to-day challenges. Sometimes, after a long day, they would cross paths at the elevator. A sense of camaraderie had replaced the earlier formality. Both recognized how they balanced each other's strengths. In small, passing moments, they would share a smile that said, "Look how far we've come." Dahlia continued supporting her mother at home, using the improved salary to buy better care. She also kept studying part-time, determined to finish her degree in finance to match her real-world experience. Step by step, she was building a life she once considered impossible. Near the end of the year, the company arranged a formal banquet for key investors and partners. Journalists were invited to cover the event, which served as a chance to showcase fresh achievements, upcoming expansions, and highlight prominent figures in the firm's leadership. Dahlia spent the morning in a final prep meeting, ensuring her presentation slides were flawless. Kibwe joined her to rehearse a brief talk they would co-deliver, discussing the company's newly established branches abroad. That evening, in a grand hotel ballroom, well-dressed guests mingled. Sparkling chandeliers cast warm light across elegantly set tables. Kibwe and Dahlia took the stage to a round of applause. They spoke about the journey from near loss to success, referencing values of trust and perseverance. At one point, Kibwe motioned toward Dahlia. "I'd like to also highlight our vice director of operations." She began as someone nobody in this room knew. Yet her honesty saved me from the worst mistake of my career. Dahlia picked up from there, explaining how essential it was to uphold transparency and moral courage in business. The crowd responded with applause that echoed across the lavish room. Various delegates later came up to congratulate her, praising the uniqueness of her rise. Late into the evening, once the main festivities wound down, Dahlia and Kibwe sat at a table, nursing cups of tea. They watched couples dance and colleagues exchange business cards. Both felt satisfied and reflective. "Hard to believe we're here," Dahlia said, a smile curving her lips. "Sometimes I still picture that cafe and my apron." Kibwe chuckled. "I guess it shows how a single act of truth can rewrite a life's path." A comfortable silence followed, Then they both smiled, raising their teacups in a simple toast to the road they had traveled. By the end of the banquet, the last guests trickled out, and staff began cleaning up. Kibwe and Dahlia lingered, continuing to talk quietly. Tomorrow would bring new responsibilities, but for now, they allowed themselves a moment to appreciate how far they'd come. Although Iomide's name rarely arose anymore, they knew the memory of his treachery was woven into the company's story, making the current success that much more meaningful. They had taken what once threatened to tear them apart and turned it into a foundation for even greater triumph. As they stepped outside, a warm breeze carried the hum of distant traffic. Dahlia closed her eyes for a second, taking in the night air. Kibwe watched her, thinking of how grateful he was to have someone like her on his team and in his life. "We should get some rest," Kibwe said finally. "Another big day tomorrow." She nodded. "Yes, thank you for everything, Kibwe." He smiled back, sincere. "And thank you, Dahlia." Within days, photos from the banquet filled social media and business news sites. Articles highlighted not only Kibwe's leadership, but also Dahlia's exceptional track from waitress to vice director. Friends and family members bombarded Dahlia with calls and messages, proud of her accomplishments. Inside the company, employees felt reinvigorated. They knew they were part of something special, with leaders who valued integrity and recognized talent. The expansion soared on, thanks to new alliances Dahlia and Kibwe had forged at the banquet. At home, Dahlia's mother read every article, her face beaming each time she saw Dahlia's name. She teased that she might put up posters soon, though Dahlia laughed, shaking her head at the idea. In truth, Dahlia was still adjusting to the sudden fame. She cherished her growing role, but deep down remained the same humble person who believed in helping other seven if it meant taking risks. Then came a calm Facino, more surprising envelopes or threats, no bombshell media stories. The lawsuit against Iomide was all but wrapped up, and the firm's future glimmered with promise. Dahlia further refined her department's structure, championing an ethos of transparency so no secret deals could lurk beneath the surface. When Kibwe glimpsed these changes, he felt a surge of admiration. Dahlia's vigilance was shaping a safer, more mindful environment for everyone. If any shady behavior were to appear again, it would be caught immediately. In many ways, Iomide's betrayal had helped them grow stronger. They had overhauled their oversight processes, improved how they onboarded new employees, and instilled a deeper sense of unity among their staff. Now, under Dahlia's guiding influence, that unity thrived. One quiet afternoon, Kibwe strolled through the building, appreciating the atmosphere of productivity. He saw Dahlia mentoring a new recruit who seemed slightly anxious. Dahlia's calm words of advice made the recruit relax, nodding vigorously. Afterward, as Dahlia passed by, Kibwe signaled for her to pause. "You've got a knack for teaching," he observed. "That new analyst was half panicked until you stepped in." Dahlia smiled. "We've all been new at some point. If someone hadn't guided me, I wouldn't be here." Kibwe felt a pang, recalling that day in the cafe. "You guided yourself, actually," he corrected. "All I did was open a door you had already unlocked." Dahlia's cheeks tinted pink with modesty. "Still, I'm grateful." They parted ways, each heading to separate meetings, but both reflecting on how paying forward kindness had become a crucial part of their company culture. Finally, as the year approached its close, Kibwe decided to host an informal gathering in a smaller reception hall, a comfortable space with couches, potted plants, and floor-to-ceiling windows framing the cityscape. He and Dahlia wanted to thank employees personally for an extraordinary turnaround year. Small groups formed, chatting over refreshments. Dahlia circulated among them, fielding congratulations on her newly minted role, and speaking about their goals for the coming quarter. Meanwhile, Kibwe greeted longtime staff, acknowledging their loyalty during turbulent times. When it was Kibwe's turn to address everyone, he chose to keep it short and heartfelt. "We've navigated some dark moments," he said. "But your work ethic, honesty, and team spirit have sparked our strongest performance yet. I can't wait to see what next year brings." Dahlia echoed those sentiments, encouraging the team to keep pushing boundaries while remaining true to the principles that saved them from ruin. Applause followed, along with bright chatter and laughs. As the night drew to an end, Kibwe and Dahlia found themselves by the panoramic windows, looking at the city lights like glittering confetti across the dark sky. "It's funny how life twists and turns," Dahlia mused. "Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed silent that day, or if you hadn't believed me." Kibwe pursed his lips. "I would have signed that contract blindly, and my life's work might be in Iomede's hands. You'd still be at that cafe, working for tips, never knowing how close you came to altering the course of 2 lives." She gave a solemn nod. "The difference a single choice can make." They watched cars move far below, neon signs flickering in and out of view. A sense of calm satisfaction enveloped them both. In that reflective hush, the weight of everything that had happened, good and bad, felt like part of a grand design guiding them to this moment. Eventually, it was time to leave. Dahlia said her goodbyes to co-workers, while Kibwe handled last-minute logistics with security. Before turning out the hall's lights, they reunited, stepping into the elevator together. As the doors slid closed, they exchanged smiles, warmed by the knowledge that their partnership was built on trust, sealed by adversity, and supported by genuine respect. Their story was far from finished. But after every obstacle, broken trust, legal threats, and moral decisions, they had emerged wiser and stronger. A single act of bravery in a quiet cafe had forged a bond that rescued a business from collapse, and in the process, opened up possibilities neither had imagined possible. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, please give it a kind nod or share it. Remember that an act of honesty, no matter how small, can reshape an entire future. We appreciate you, and hope you carry the message of courage and trust in all your endeavors.